Ecuador's Natalia Greene is a key figure in the movement for the recognition of the rights of Mother Nature, or Pachamama, which, as she explains, is an even broader and more inclusive South American concept of the reality in which we all live and breathe. She was a central figure in the creation of Ecuador's 2008 Constitution, which specifically recognized the rights of nature. And she was deeply involved in the creation of Ecuador's remarkable Yasuni ITT initiative, which aimed to keep oil underground in the Amazon region.
I've been working with the rights of nature idea since we were able to include it in the Constitution. How this happened is that I had been working for the Yasuni ITT initiative. Before it actually became an initiative, I was working with a professor called Carlos Larrea, and we were working with him to make the assessment on how much money should we ask the world for the Yasuni ITT initiative and all of that. This was 2007, and it was that year where the constitutional process started in Montecristi. Alberto Costa was running as he was the president of the assembly, and he asked Carlos Larrea to get involved in especially advising the assembly members about environmental issues, so we will be able to get a very environmentally friendly constitution. During that time, because I had been working with the Yasuni issue, I got involved with Fundación Pachamama. And Fundación Pachamama offered to have a very active role in the constitution in general, especially with some issues like extractivism, like water, and with this idea with rights of nature. So what happened is that we decided to include the issue of rights of nature, not with enough hope, not hoping that it will be included as a right, but at least to have a context of a different conversation, to at least have a conversation where we were starting from a point where we understand that we are part of nature. And then, of course, the laws that came in the Constitution will be coherent with that idea.
There's something that didn't get talked about very much, at least I haven't heard talked about very much, was the vision of Ecuador in saying, we're facing things like climate change. These are international problems. We have to start doing things on an international basis, you know, in one country after another. But we have to start thinking as a species, and that to me was another really magnificent aspect of it.
Well, something very interesting in that sense is that as Ecuador, we are no Annex I country, which means that we don't have responsibilities in the Kyoto Protocol. We don't need to reduce our emissions because we are not responsible for those big emissions like countries like the US or China. So we don't have necessarily objectives in the Kyoto Protocol. However, we understand that we are also affecting climate change, especially not only by the industries and the pollution and the CO2 and the greenhouse gas emissions, but especially through the deforestation. We are pretty much deforesting our forests, and that of course affects climate change. The idea of the Yasuni ITT initiative is very important because we are targeting the main problem. The problem with climate change negotiations are that they're all talking about something that is irreal. It's something that you cannot touch, something that you cannot see, which is carbon dioxide. You know, CO2 is something that everybody talks about, but no one knows where it is, what it is. You know, that has been, I think, the way of making governments and people take their idea out and say there are people who are responsible for this without understanding that when they go and pump their car with oil, they are responsible for climate change. They've been taking the idea out of the main problem, which are fossil fuels. That's the main problem. Those are the responsible for creating all that CO2 into the atmosphere. So I think that maybe the most important part about the Yasuni ITT initiative is that it targeted the main point. You know, instead of just putting a Band-Aid over the something, you know, something that is hurt, we were targeting the problem that caused that injury.
The indigenous response to the idea of rights of nature is, what on earth are you talking about, right? That the idea that you need to even think about that would strike them as being quite bizarre.
Yes,
right? Yeah?
And that was exactly the reaction that we had. We spoke with Marlon Santi was at that point president of CONAI, and we had some meetings with them, and that of course they said they couldn't believe that our legal system didn't introduce rights of nature, didn't give, not necessarily like that, but didn't give nature the right to exist, because for them and their cosmovision it was always incorporated. So what was very interesting was that in our constitution, we don't only recognize the rights of nature, because nature, as viewed is in Western society, is the trees, water, but it's nature. But Pachamama is much broader than that. Because the Constitution, Article 71, says nature or Pachamama has the right to exist, maintain, because we have those two as synonyms, it broadens the idea of nature to Pachamama, including the cosmos, spirituality, the universe. Even Blanquita Chancoso during this week, she was explaining the word Pachamama as time, as truth, as the cosmos. So you're introducing all of that. You're not only limiting yourself to nature as Western society defines it. You're exploring that notion of Pachamama.
Nati Greene of Ecuador, activist, organizer, and passionate advocate for the rights of Pachamama. If you're interested in Ecuador, and it's a fascinating country, you may want to watch for our interviews with its former energy minister, Alberto Acosta, and with the brilliant young environmental lawyer, Pablo Fajardo. If you're interested in the rights of nature, take a look at our interviews with David Boyd and John Burroughs, and stay tuned. For our Green Rights documentary project, we've interviewed rights of nature advocates from Africa and Australia, from Europe and South America. If those interviews aren't on the site when you see this, they're coming soon. For the Green Rights documentary project and the Green Interview, I'm Silver Donald Cameron.